It is now July of 2024. I usually have this video out around the time of the Oscars, mostly because of the fact that, a lot of people are at that time are discussing their favorite films of the previous year. But why did I wait months to really discuss this year? Well, there's a lot of reasons. So let's really talk about 2023. 2023 was a year full of change. A lot of changes, a lot of revelations that made me really reconsider not just the industry that I cover, but also the industry I strive to be a part of. Or rather, do I even really want to be a part of that industry? When I went to film school, I had the aspirations of becoming a filmmaker, and I still do. I still have various feature film ideas I'm still scratching out. I have various short film projects I'm still trying to hash out the details on. And hell, I'm even trying to write original music for some of my other projects. At the same time, when I look at 2023, it really showcased some of the biggest problems of the film industry. Last year, we had multiple different strikes happen with the SAG-AFTRA union and the WGA, both having collectively, lost their patience with the various studios in respectability, in pay, in the studios wanting to use AI, in them wanting to use an actor's likeness without being compensated. Lots of different things, especially in a year where a lot of the corporate PR about celebrating movies and stories immediately get contradicted by the company's actions by basically having them write off a bunch of movies that were either mostly produced and almost finished, or even just outright removing films and TV shows from their catalog, all because of a tax write-off. And then you later come to find out that the people who bought that very same company basically are like, yeah, let's just try to divide the studio that I just bought for billions of dollars and wasted a bunch of time and a lot of emotional, weight just dividing the company. Like, seriously, you bought Warner Brothers for billions of dollars. Why? It fucking messes me up, man. And honestly, given this past year, I can't begrudge any filmmaker getting discouraged because of all of this. Like, you're basically looking at an industry where everything's being cannibalized, and why would we want to be part of a system where if we work on a film, it doesn't necessarily get guaranteed to get any release at all? And even if your film does release, maybe it doesn't get a physical release. Maybe it doesn't get a home release. Maybe it doesn't even get a digital release. We're facing down the barrel of a lot of changing tides in Hollywood, a lot of growing pains, especially from industry insiders, when a lot of the new studio heads are not really in the business of making movies or telling stories, but rather about acquiring IP or expanding technological efforts, like with the new owners of Paramount. It's very much a chaotic time in Hollywood history, and none could be more said than the films that I watched in 2023. A lot of the films that I gravitated towards were films that kind of challenged the idea of our own perception of identity, how we choose to identify ourselves, or rather, what defines us, what defines the human experience in the face of a world where people are wanting more and more AI art, AI videos being made because they don't want to compensate the artists, because they think that somehow, not trying to, put effort into picking up a craft and learning how to do it within a certain amount of time somehow, makes any art less than what you could just put into a computer. It's a lot. 2023 is very emblematic of a very chaotic time. Nothing makes sense, but yet everything somehow oddly does. So let's talk about my favorite films of 2023. And what better way to start off this video than to talk about Barbenheimer? The ultimate, out of nowhere success that it was. Like, we all knew that Barbie was probably going to be a big hit, but the fact that Barbie and Oppenheimer mixed together as a weird double feature lent itself to a social media space that grew a grassroots, genuine movement of enthusiasm and just fan appreciation. Yes, Greta Gerwig and Christopher Nolan are pretty big names in the director's space, but not only did this double feature appeal to film fans like myself, but just average moviegoers. Both films were very much a big ensemble cast of actors you know, and maybe actors that returned to the screen that you didn't realize was gone for a long time, like, say, Josh Hartnett. When you look at a success like Barbenheimer, it's weird that studios have tried to kind of recreate this sort of genuine movement by making fake hashtags like Saw Patrol. Yes, that was a real thing. That's usually the sort of thing that studios fail to learn, is that, well, in the era of social media, no one really knows when the next big thing is going to be. In fact, when Barbenheimer even started, I thought it was just a meme. I thought we were all joking about it. But no, there was genuine support. People were taking sides of which one you were going to go see. Were you going to go see Barbie? Were you going to go see Oppenheimer? And it was crazy. And now, granted, I did Barbie first and then Oppenheimer, which I felt was a pretty interesting way to end my night. I would go more into, like, why this sort of pairing oddly works, but I need to do a little bit more analysis and really dissecting the two films, so that might be a whole other discussion of it in of itself. But both movies essentially are big ensemble pieces that are really big hits. Like, Barbie got over $1 billion, Oppenheimer almost got $1 billion, which is one of Christopher Nolan's most recent successful films. But I would say both movies are on my favorites list for very different reasons. Barbie is a film about self-identity. It's about, you know, not really needing permission from any other person, not even your creator, to exist and choosing to be who you want to be. And I think that in of itself is such a good message, especially when you pair it with, you know, some of the film's soundtrack. I also really enjoyed the production design of this film. Apparently it used so much pink paint it caused like a shortage. I don't know if that's true or not. I just heard it around in film circles, not entirely sure. I really liked the cheeky direction. There is some things I wasn't necessarily a fan of in the film, but overall I felt like it was a really solid film, just pertaining to Barbie. In a similar vein as how Lego understood Lego, I feel like the Barbie movie kind of took the basic idea of what Barbie is and just kind of expanded on it, like, hugely. And Oppenheimer is about, well, our legacies. The legacy that not just Oppenheimer has, but of America, of everything. And it's a little depressing, but it's also pretty good. And who knew that, like, an R-rated 3-hour movie that jumps back and forth in time, that has black and white elements, that has a huge ensemble cast, that is about a really heavy subject, would actually be one of the year's biggest hits. And if you want a companion piece for Oppenheimer, I suggest Richland, which was released last year as part of the Tribeca film slate of 2023. Pretty good documentary overall. Highly recommend it. But yeah, I really enjoyed both of these movies. Really great stuff from both Greta Gerwig and Christopher Nolan. This year also saw a few animated projects as well that I really enjoyed. Nimona, especially, as an adaptation, I felt it was well communicated. There is some things I did prefer from the book to the movie, particularly the ending. I like the ending of the book maybe just a little bit more. But the overall conversation with this movie, or at least the overall theme of this movie, is how society basically frames, like, who its villains are. Right? And how it just kind of continues to perpetuate these notions of these, you know, of who the villain is, right? And that's where we have Nimona. That's where we have this character. And especially during a time when you have so many politicians who try to use this whole, like, oh my God, people who identify as trans, or people who are part of the LGBT community are groomers and they want to take your kids. But the thing I like most about Nimona is that it was kind of a success story that started out from being kind of a failure, like, or not really a failure, but more like a victim of circumstance. The fact that this movie was shelved and moved around after what Disney did to Blue Sky Studios, which in of itself is a topic of a different discussion, it's really great to see a company like, say, Annapurna pick it up and say, you know what, we'll release this as our first animated project, and it actually hits. It has really gorgeous animation, a great voice cast, it has a really great theme, a great message, and it has some really fun characters. And I really like the world that both the book and this movie really showcase. This sort of medieval sci-fi sort of mashup. You don't really see a lot of creative mashups like that anymore, and I think it's really cool. And of course, why shouldn't we talk about the, follow-up to Into the Spider-Verse, one of the best animated films of the 2010s, with Across the Spider-Verse, probably one of the best animated films of the 2020s. Now, granted, at the moment of this recording, there hasn't really been any word on when the third entry of this trilogy is going to be out, but Across the Spider-Verse by itself, I think it's a pretty solid follow-up. I don't know if I would say it's the best of the two, but I would say that animation-wise, it's pushed a bit further. I would say that the characters are way more interesting this time around. Not to say that the first one wasn't interesting, but there's so many more interesting things happening with some of the characters, especially with Miguel being this antagonist who very much embodies a lot of the terrible ideas that some toxic fanboys like to push around, like, oh, you're not a real Spider-Man, Miles Morales. There's a lot of people that are saying, like, oh my god, Miles Morales isn't Spider-Man, Peter Parker is Spider-Man, Miles Morales is Miles Morales. Bullshit. They're both Spider-Man. Get over it. And then, of course, this year also saw the return of master animator and one of the biggest names in animation, Hayao Miyazaki, with the film The Boy and the Heron, which in Japan, it's How Do You Live, which is an adaptation of the book. I don't know which name I like better, but for the most part, I really dug this film. Granted, I do need to rewatch it just to see my full thoughts really fully culminate, but I do remember watching it in the theater and just being mesmerized. There's just something about a Miyazaki film that gets you into a headspace of being invited into its fantasy. Not just of its fantasy, but kind of delving deeper into its themes in the deeper subtext. And to me, what this film ultimately is about the legacy, right? And yes, the boy is essentially, Hayao Miyazaki himself, but I would also like to say that the old man that's in the tower is also Miyazaki. I feel like this is sort of a bridging of the gaps of both his past and his present, and the legacy of who's going to pick up the mantle of creation after he's gone. Granted, that's just my read of the movie. I could be very much wrong with my read. Fully on board with it, but I'd say The Boy and the Heron is a really good film. I don't know if I would say it's his best, but it's in like the top 3 for me. And then, of course, there was also TMNT Mutant Mayhem, which I felt was pretty solid. It kind of had that same vibe I had when watching the original 1990s film, the original film, but it also has its more modern, updated stuff. I like its grungy aesthetic. It has that sort of similar art direction as Spider-Verse, but it's taken more in a direction of, Sharpies and all these other different materials, making it a little more grungy. Now, granted, not tonally grungy, but like just visually grungy, which is pretty nice. I liked all the characters in the film. I really liked the characterizations of all of the brothers. I really liked Jackie Chan as Splinter. I thought he was great. And this is a film about, belonging, about who our real families are, and all this other stuff. I really like it. I thought it was great. I saw it multiple times in the theater. Just had a really good old time with it. Horror had some pretty big hits this past year. I would say No One Will Save You is one of my favorites. It's not everyone's cup of tea. It's very light on dialogue, but it's very heavy on action. And that's where Caitlin Dever's performance is probably the strongest of the year, because there's a lot that is asked of her in this movie. A lot of emotions she's able to just do, physically embody, and the direction by Brian Duffield is just amazing to watch. And this movie essentially is all about how do we forgive ourselves? Can we get forgiveness? Can we get mercy for things that we did in the past that were wrong, right? And that's where the line "No one will save you" comes in. It's interesting. And again, the dialogue here is very sparse. People will say that this is way too trippy of a movie or it's too artsy, but I would say it's pretty good. I'd say it was well directed. I say it's well shot. There's a lot of interesting ideas that are at play here with religion and grief and, wanting forgiveness. And I think that's an interesting sort of thing to explore in this film. Even if it's not all there, I think it works very, very well. Talk to Me is an interesting movie because this is by the Philippou brothers, who, if you don't know, were part of a group called Raka Raka on YouTube. And for all of you OG fans out there, you know who Raka Raka is. You know how crazy they are with their stunts. They'll throw themselves through walls. They'll do some weird stunts by jumping off the roof. One of them will dress up like a fucked up Ronald McDonald and just punch a kid in the face. But it's amazing to see a group of people like Raka Raka, people from Raka Raka, go and create one of the most viscerally horrifying movies of the past year. And I would say Talk to Me is one of my favorite horror movies of the year, mostly because of just how visceral it gets. I like the sort of dreamlike imagery it's able to conjure up with its edits and its cinematography. I like the performances, really love the main performance from the main actress. I like the gore effects in this film. If it's one thing that Raka Raka knows how to do, it's know how to make some very visceral looking imagery. And the Philippou brothers bring it in this movie. And apparently it's getting a sequel, so we'll have to wait and see where that goes, but I can't wait to see it. Saw X was a very interesting movie to me because I did not really peg this movie to being one of my favorite horror movies of the year. But much like some of my favorite entries from Saw, like Saw 6, it takes its approach more seriously, and that's where we actually get a pretty compelling movie. And unlike a lot of the other films where a lot of John's sort of motivations are given to us through background information and flashbacks, this movie is purely front and center with Jigsaw himself. The fact that Tobin Bell is still rocking this role is amazing. He gives one of the best performances of the year as John, a character who has been wronged so thoroughly and is pissed off so royally about the fact that these doctors would give the false hope of, salvation only to basically fuck him up even more. And then John getting revenge on them is such a cool thing. I don't know why I would say cool thing, but it's a cool thing. And I really dug some of the traps. I do think there is a little bit of a downgrade in some of them, like the X-ray machine. I wasn't necessarily a fan of that one. That one just seemed a little bit cruel to me. But the rest of them, they're pretty good traps. And I really liked it. I dug it. And I really liked the main doctor lady. I can't quite remember her name. It's been a long time since I've seen it. She just had that energy of like, I will fuck around and find out. And I hope she comes back, because it does seem that she survived, and I would like to see her face off against Jigsaw again in some weird way. I think it would be cool. Evil Dead Rise is another film that I really liked. I knew I was going to like it because I liked the direction it was going to go in. And while granted it's not as comedic or even as deranged as other Evil Dead entries, it definitely had its own sense of flavor. Like, you mix the ideas from, like, say, Poltergeist 3, you mix it in with Evil Dead, you mix it in with, like, a family drama, and you get a pretty interesting Evil Dead movie. I do think that the wraparound that this film has with the prologue and the ending don't really, it doesn't really do much for me, but the meat of the movie, this movie about motherhood and all this other stuff, I think it's just well done. I like the gore, I like the choreography, I like the storytelling at play. I thought it was all great, and I would most gladly see another film from Lee Cronin. I think he did an amazing job with this film, and I can't wait to see what happens with the Evil Dead franchise. Apparently there's 2 more films in development that are from completely different people, so I'm all for it. I like a little bit of deadite action. But of course, the biggest horror movie of the year, the one that gained an Oscar nomination and an Oscar trophy in a franchise that has been around for 60, 70 years now, Godzilla Minus One. And Godzilla Minus One kind of harkens back to its roots of being this sort of horror movie based off of atomic events. This film takes almost a completely different approach. Like, yeah, the Godzilla monster is very much emblematic of the nuclear war, but for the main character, it's about his failure during the war, his regret, and it's all bottled together. And so when you get him going to try to attack Godzilla in the third act and having all of these people from Japan just kind of help him out, it kind of symbolizes this whole, like, hey, the government's not going to be with us, we're all going to go together and we're all going to take down this monster. I felt like the third act is just so beautiful, so beautifully put together. Godzilla himself never looked better. I think he's really good in this film, and I really, really loved the film's main themes, and I love the music. Again, music goes fucking hard. When the main Godzilla theme starts hitting up, when the boats go out, fucking amazing. I loved it. It's one of the best films of the year by far. As far as action blockbuster movies this year goes, out of all the Marvel Cinematic Universe features go, the best one of the year is undoubtedly Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's just so satisfying seeing a film trilogy be finished by the main guy who brought it all together in the first place. And I really dug it. Rather than being a film about Peter Quill, it instead focuses its efforts on Rocket Raccoon, and I feel like it saved the best story for last. And while for me, I wasn't necessarily on board with all of the soundtrack for this one, I really liked the soundtrack, but it's not as good as both parts 1 and 2. In my mind, though, this movie has one of the biggest emotional cores out of all of them, and I really, really, really dug that. And while, yes, the Guardians don't get too much to do, and it is mostly focused on Rocket, that's not to mean that there isn't things the Guardians can't do, right? They're still trying to find Rocket. They're still trying to, kind of figure out what they are and where they want to go individually as characters, especially with the relationship between, Peter and Gamora not necessarily being all there anymore, considering the events of Infinity War and Endgame. A lot of it had to kind of be picked up from there and just kind of figure out where it goes. And I did like the ending. I really do. Like, when you have, the scene, the Dog Days Are Over playing over, everyone dancing and everyone parting their ways. It's such a emotionally resonant scene with me. And I also like I like the dynamic between Rocket and Layla. I like Layla as a character. I wish they could, show more of her, but I really liked all of the characters being introduced. And I really liked the High Evolutionary as a villain, not just because of what he stands for, but of, like, how fucked up he can get, how his mind really works in, like, a sort of, like, hey, God left us and I had to step in and I say what gets to live and what gets to be experimented on. And it's a really fucked up villain, and I really like that. And I am excited to see what James Gunn can do with Superman. I'm not entirely sure how that direction will go, but we'll have to wait and see. But as a Guardians of the Galaxy fan, I'm perfectly okay with them not bringing in the Guardians of the Galaxy for a while. Another blockbuster this year that came out that unfortunately didn't do well at the box office was Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. This one I find to be a little sad that it didn't get much more attention. It had everything that I would like in some comedy action blockbusters. It has humor, it has creative ways to get across action and humor. It's from the same people who made Game Night, which is one of my favorite comedies of the 2010s. You had a pretty good cast of characters played by some pretty decent actors, especially Justice Smith as the mage. I felt he was great. Chris Pine as the bard was really fun. More especially, I liked the swordsman. Just how stoic he can be. I thought he was really hilarious. And again, there's just something that's really fun and creative and inventive with this movie that also has references to D&D adjacent things. And it's a pretty decent story overall. It's just kind of a shame it didn't get as much attention as it should have. And I really hope that we do get another movie from these people again, from this universe again, because I would love to see another tale spun in this universe. And another film that came out this year was John Wick Chapter 4, the finale of the John Wick series, or I hope it is. I'm not saying this movie is bad, but I am saying that this film almost overstayed its welcome for me. There's just so much action and there's so much of it that is happening that it almost becomes tiring after a while. But then at that same moment, you also realize that it's probably tiring for John as well as a character. So, in that same respect, touche, filmmakers, touche, editors. I get John, I get John. Even if I think there was too much action and I think there was too much movie in this movie, which is kind of weird to say, even with all that, they still put their all in every scene that they did. There's so much really well choreographed action sequences. The staircase sequence by itself is pretty cool. The hotel sequence, where it kind of mimics sort of Hotline Miami for a little bit with the overhead shot, is really cool as well. Again, the action, it's just well directed. It's a well directed action piece that, it's not necessarily the best of the John Wick films, but as an ending, it's completely fine. I just wish there was maybe a little bit more meat on the bone, but that's just... And then the last of the action blockbusters I had this year on my favorites is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. I know that a lot of people didn't necessarily go out to see this movie, but I really did dig this movie. And I have to give props and credit to the director and, Tom Cruise and his willingness to, put himself out there. He has done some crazy, insane shit in this series. The Mission Impossible movies are all about sort of raising the ante of what is feasible to do, and I really dig that creative energy. Even though I did dig Fallout over Dead Reckoning, I think Dead Reckoning is just maybe a little bit too long, and there is some new characters that don't really get their time to shine. I did ultimately still dig the film overall. If it's anything, Tom Cruise is persistent in what he wants to show the audience and what he wants the audience to experience, especially when he had films a couple years ago, like, say, Top Gun Maverick, that really put everything through its paces. And Dead Reckoning was no exception to it. It definitely is weird to have a villain of this franchise be this sort of AI artificial intelligence, but in that same breath, we do now have an environment where you have corporations that want to use AI for their creative projects. So honestly, I think it's a pretty interesting villain pair in this series. So, and the film does end off on a cliffhanger, unfortunately, so I'm not entirely sure where this is going to go. I'm interested to see where it goes, but as far as I know, the film, the second part of this Dead Reckoning, is getting retitled, and this film, being a part one, is now just called Dead Reckoning, as far as I know anyway. So, yeah. There were a few documentaries I saw last year that I also really enjoyed. Some of them are not like great documentaries, but some of them are pretty good documentaries. But this first one, Finding Groovopolis, is such an interesting documentary. Finding Groovopolis is about a filmmaker who finds an abandoned, script that his father had wrote. And in the pursuit of trying to make this particular film, he finds more and more details out about his dad that kind of fill in the gaps of what he knew about his dad, to some pretty interesting revelations. And I really dug the direction of this documentary. I love the way in which, as we are finding out, or as he is finding out more about his dad through his writing, we are also finding out on the larger spectrum, like, where that relationship is. And it's actually pretty well produced. There's a lot of great shots. There's a lot of great recreations. I really dug this documentary. If you can find it, definitely watch it. I think it's a highly recommendable documentary, just on its own. I think it's pretty good. Then there was also Still, a Michael J. Fox story, which is a documentary about Michael J. Fox, his early career, his struggles, and his activism through his Parkinson's Foundation, and how, he tries to live through his life with optimism and with hope. And I think that is a really positive message in of itself. But as a subject, Michael J. Fox is just an interesting person to follow. Again, this is a guy who is affected by Parkinson's, but also is a person that is very, he's never down, right? He's never, he's never depressed. He's always a person that just keeps on chugging forward because, he has the will, he has the hope, he has all of that. And I really like that. I really like that in Michael J. Fox as a person, and of this film. I just really liked it. Chasing Amy is a documentary about chasing Amy, but not just about chasing Amy, but of Sev Rogers's relationship to that movie. How they were big fans of that movie, but also as they started to learn more about the production, the behind the scenes, the larger context of the movie, what it means to different communities, especially for the lesbian community, and various other things that were happening with certain actors behind the scenes, Sev is constantly confronted by the unraveling of their relationship to that movie. Because for a lot of us, we all have a favorite movie, but it's when we are confronted with new information about the movie and what it meant to us versus what it did to other people, it creates this interesting sort of dynamic, that sort of changing of minds of the filmmaker themselves. And I think that's a really interesting thing in the documentary. One of the most interesting documentaries about our relationship to media at large and how it connects people together. They did an amazing job with this documentary, and I hope that they do more documentaries. I think it's great. Not just documentaries, just films in general, because they do have a good eye for storytelling, and I think they can pull off more films if they want to. So, yeah, kudos to Sev. And the last documentary on my documentary side of things is The Gulfspan Miracle. Now, The Gulfspan Miracle is an interesting film because it starts off very unassumingly. It's a story about two people who go to try to buy a house from this one person, and they find that this person looks an awfully lot like one of the people's sisters who is long lost. But it's as soon as they try to incorporate this person into their lives that they start to figure out that the story, it's not as simple as it sounds. And I found this movie, with all of its twists and turns, so painstakingly just weird and confusing, and sometimes just downright interesting. Again, all these twists and turns just made me want to continue to see where this, how deep the rabbit hole really goes with this mystery person, And I thought it was well put together. I thought most of the revelations that are done is pretty good. Although, yes, there is some twists that are a little bit predictable in terms of the way in which information is given to us. But I did find that this documentary is, again, it's well produced. It's interesting. It has a lot of great twists and turns. It has a lot of interesting things happening. And I really like the main subject of the movie. I think she is just very mysterious. And we still don't even know who she really, really is. And it's cool. I think it's cool. And now I come to the last section that I have on my little list here of other films that made my favorites list. So let's go through them. So we have Poor Things by Yorgos Lanthimos. This has by far one of my favorite Emma Stone performances. It's what I really loved about Emma Stone's performance is that it's, when you start seeing her character, it's very much looking at the world through her eyes in most cases, right? Seeing her explore her environment and getting to see the world anew, given that if you know the context, you know the context. I'm not going to say any of the context because that would be spoiling it. But, all these new revelations for her as a character, for Bella, is so interesting. And I really like her performance. She just changes over time and just grows as a person. And I really like that. Color me crazy. I thought her performance was great. I really like Willem Dafoe. I like his makeup design as well for the movie. I thought it was pretty cool. I like the production design. I thought the cinematography gives it a sort of lens of just weird and abstract. I like the score. I think the score is really nice. I like the production design. I like the costume design. I think the costume design is probably one of the best parts of the movie. And the overall story about Bella and the realizations that she realizes about herself is really cool. Not cool as in like, oh my god, this is cool and amazing, but just like, I really like the revelations, and I like how she responds to them, and I really like the ending. I really do. I'm glad that person is eating grass. And if you know the movie, you know what I'm referring to. And I'm not going to spoil it here, so just go watch it. The Holdovers is another movie I really liked this year. A lot of its moments that I really liked was its more intimate, quiet moments where we're with the characters inside of just this empty space during the holidays. And when we're in these sort of areas where characters can interact with each other in very, very normal ways, I found it to be somewhat endearing in some cases. The aspect of, being alone on Christmas and having someone to be with during a time when they can't go home for Christmas is something that I really like in this film. I really like Paul Giamatti's character. I like his performance. I will never not think of the fish meme in the same way again, but fish. And I also like Divine Joy Randolph's performance. I really like, I can't quite remember the other actor's name at the moment, but the main actor. Apparently, this is his first film role, and I'm surprised. I'm stunned. I think he did an amazing job as well. All three performers did an amazing job. I like the aesthetics of this movie. I like the way this film was shot, the way it was color graded. It just has this sort of like nice, cozy Christmas time, winter time feel, even when the subject of the film is maybe a little bit more darker than its coziness. And I enjoyed the hell out of it. I thought it was great. Theater Camp was another film I really liked this year. I thought it was really nice. As someone who grew up going to like theater camps as a kid, it did have a lot of things that I gravitated towards. It was like, yeah, I remember some people were doing that, or I remember doing this at a summer camp. And I like the main relationship between Ben Platt and his writing partner in the movie. I thought that was great. And it's just cool. I just thought it was really cool. I don't really have a lot of other thoughts. It's a really funny comedy. I thought it was cool. The last song is really beautiful. I thought it was great. And everyone did an amazing job of that movie. I will gladly watch it again with someone who hasn't watched it because I want to see their reactions to some of the things that happen, and I thought it was really cool. Another film I watched, which was from the Eastern Oregon Film Festival, was Intermedium, which is a film that was done by the same people who did Long Lost. And this was a feature film adaptation of a short film that they did where this girl and her family move into this house, but the girl has a problem where there's a ghost that lives in her house and the ghost won't leave her the fuck alone. So she tries everything she can to try to get him out of the house. It's really nice. I like the weird romance that kind of happens between the ghost and this girl, but also kind of like how nice it is, right? I thought it was funny. I thought it was really charming, and it also had a nice emotional center to it that I really, really appreciated. I don't really see a lot of films like this. This is a very crazy movie. Not like when I say that, I'm not trying to oversell it. Like, it's not the craziest, but I thought like the concept itself is pretty fun. It's crazy, and it worked. I thought it really, really worked. So, good job. I thought it was great. I will gladly buy it on Blu-ray if it ever comes out on Blu-ray. Bottoms was a surprise to me. I thought it was really funny. I thought the main conceit of the movie was really funny. The fact that these two students are like, yeah, we're gonna pick up some dates by teaching a self-defense class, which, yeah, that's a little scummy. It's a little bit of a scummy premise from these two characters, but ultimately, it's still good. I still think it's a really cool movie. Ayo Edebiri has had an amazing goddamn year, and she still continues to make some really cool stuff. Her episode of The Bear is probably one of my favorites of season 3, but that's a whole other discussion for another time. But this film, along with a lot of the other stuff that she's done in the past year, really makes me believe that she could be one of the youngest people to get an EGOT, which I am all in favor for. I think that's a really cool. I think that's really cool. And not only is Ayo Edebiri funny, but I also like her co-star. She's also really funny. And also Marshawn Lynch is in this movie. Former Seattle Seahawks football player is in this movie because apparently he did this because he wanted to support his sister, which is pretty cool. And I really like him. He's really hilarious in this movie. I did not expect him to be this hilarious. If he wants to, he can certainly go do some more comedies. I think he's pretty cool at it. But yeah, I thought Bottoms was really funny. I thought it was entertaining. Yeah, I like the movie. And the last one that I'm going to mention in this video is Wonka. Now, Wonka, it's not a perfect movie by any means, but to me, it is a film about the joys in creation. The joys of creating something that brings people together, that makes people smile. And when I think back to what I said in the introduction of this video, like, how do I contend with the reality? Like, how do I continue to be a filmmaker in a reality where so many corporations will take what I create and just either feed it into an AI machine or cut it for budget cuts or tax write-offs or some other malicious thing? Why do I do it? Why do I create the things that I create? Why do I want to create movies? Why do I want to tell stories? Wonka reminded me of it. Wonka is a movie by Paul King, and if you don't know his filmography, a lot of his filmography tends to be about hope and optimism and about the communities that we share, about the things that bring the world together. His Paddington movies especially kind of deal in this, but Wonka is, by all its measurements, a movie about you know, bringing together a community of people in the face of all these corporations doing some really dirty shit. And I think it's a pretty good film to kind of end my video on, because it's very emblematic of where I want to be in terms of my mindset going forward about making movies. You know, again, we have all these big companies that are just doing some bullshit by buying up other companies, by creating a corner market, you know, trying to cannibalize each other and just create one big giant mega conglomerate. And then you have all these other people that are trying to make their way in the world, that are trying to make their businesses happen, that are trying to make their dreams happen. And they do it with the help of people around them. They do it with the help and the hope that, you know, their dreams will become a reality with the people that you make it with. And I think, you know, I thought Wonka is just a really good movie. I got emotional. I really like the connection with Wonka and his chocolate and how that relates to his mom. It's really nice. I thought the music was really good. I thought the direction overall was pretty good. I like the stuff that they do with the chocolate and the candies. All the candies look really delicious. I like Keegan-Michael Key in this movie. I thought he was great. Timothée Chalamet continues to be such a terrific actor. And I really like the direction that Paul King has for this movie. And it's such a good way to end this video on, honestly. Because, yes, even though the situation in the film industry and of the world at large seems bleak, it seems terrible, the answer really is to keep our heads held high and to find people in our lives that want to make our dreams come true, to make our communities come true. And I think that's the best that we can have right now, is a little hope, is a little optimism. And yes, is it foolhardy? Maybe. But at least it's something. It's better than not having any hope at all and not getting to see anything through. Thanks for watching my video. Thanks for being with me in my little existentialist discussion of 2023. And here's to hoping I actually get the 2024 video done in time for the Oscars. Who knows? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Who knows? But until next time, I'll see you at the movies. Peace.